Hey, before we get started here, I just want to let you know that as a little thanks for listening, my company's offering listeners to this podcast some free software. So if you want to learn more about that, we have some more details at the end after the interview. Alternatively, track me down on LinkedIn and I'll have a pinned post at the top of my profile. Just search for Joe Meadows and we'll take it from there. All right, let's get started. Hi there, this is Joe Meadows and welcome to Safety Leaders Now, the show where we cut through the noise and identify the strategies and tactics that today's top safety leaders use to keep their team safe. This week, we've got Larry Coots on the podcast. You sat in on the episode. What did you think about it?
I did. As per usual, great conversation. Good job, Joe. I really liked listening to Larry. This guy is clearly a lifelong learner. So I think that was a really refreshing perspective on the show. I feel like a lot of people can take some of the stuff that he had mentioned, use it in their own lives. So yeah, I thought he was great.
Yeah, for sure. I thought there was tons of great stuff about having a distributed team, how to drive culture in that environment. And my biggest takeaway, I guess, from this conversation was that I think to the title of the show, Larry's super focused on leadership as a tenant and clearly something he's super passionate about. And I think there was a lot of good takeaways there that I think people will enjoy. So yeah, I think it's a great one, a little bit different in tone than some of the more safety focused episodes. I'd say this is a little bit more of a leadership focused episode, but I think they go hand in hand. I think people are going to get a ton out of it. So I think it's awesome.
1,000%. Yeah. Especially like his background in the fire service and stuff. You really get that taste of discipline that he incorporates in his own life and then what he tries to kind of share with his teammates. So yeah, a different direction, but still equally cool and lots to learn from it.
Okay. Well, let's not totally ruin the episode. Let's let people listen to it and pick up on all this other stuff. But yeah, I think it's a great one and I hope you enjoy it. Maybe just to get us started here, can you just quickly kind of introduce yourself and let us know where you work and what the company does?
Yeah, I work for Superheat. We're a heat treating company that services the oil and gas industry, nuclear side, and power plants. We deal with preheating up the metal. It's metallurgy. So we preheat in post-weld and sometimes what we call a bake out. So we're a niche. We're a technology-based company that surrounds ourselves in the service. We're throughout Canada, the US, and have a footprint over in the UK. Have about 30 some locations with approximately about 500 employees.
And what's your role
I'm the
within Superheat?
Yeah, I'm the corporate safety director. Have a team of about 8 employees throughout that they encompass some of the regions that we spread out and divide. And I oversee that and support any operations.
Okay, cool. And so heat treatment, metallurgy, can you give us maybe just again maybe this is just evidence of kind of my ignorance, but can you get a little bit more into the weeds as far as what's your team doing when they show up on site and kind of what's the benefit that you're providing to the customer, just so I can better understand why would they want something heat treated?
No, great question. Think about, product going through the pipes in the refinery. Yep. There's different codes aspect to those, and there's different types of caustics, different types of pressures. So we come in and we do a preheat that's heating the metal up to, approximately 300 degrees. And then the welding company would come in and weld it. What it's doing, it's reassuring the conformity of the metals coming together. It's ensuring that that weld is correct when they come back in and inspect it. So there's no imperfections. And then we can come back in, depending on the composition of the metal and the thickness, we can come back in and post weld it, which would take it up to anywhere from 1,200 to 1,600 degrees and let it soak for a period of time and let it cool back down. And that's just making all those different molecules in there join, be one happy family. And so that way it makes it more of a good connection. Yeah. It's the bottom line. It's code driven.
I can dig that. I mean, we had I used to work in subsea pipe lay, and we had a bunch of welders and stuff like that. We focused a lot more on coatings and things like that than actually heating up the entire structure. But I think broadly conceptualize what you're laying out there. So this actual heating itself, what does that look like? Is that a couple guys show up with some tiger torches and just go to town?
Yeah, good. No, we have, it's amazing. We have some technology And, the owner of the company has really put some process safety management into our equipment. So we have a footprint. The machines are, I call them cubes. And we bring out our cubes into the field, and then we run, our cables to the heat treatment area, which you can imagine in the oil and gas industry and even the nuclear areas, you have exclusion zones. So there's areas that have, either issues with LELs, or in the nuclear field, you have safe areas that you can't really access, or if you can, it's a short duration. So we're able to take our equipment, set it up in that zone, put we call them chiclets or heating pads onto the piping, wrap it with some insulation and pull back out, and then be able to turn our equipment on.
Gotcha. So it's
a really small footprint, and it's amazing with the technology that we do have, the way we can measure and set parameters to control that and see what's actually going on at any minute of the time. So throughout our industry, I say this and I show like a cell phone, I have control and oversight of every single heat treating that's taking place currently in our company.
That's wild.
Technology.
So it's literally like they rock up, bring in the equipment, they can go in there, set it up, wrap it, and then kind of stand off and be able to monitor all that stuff remotely.
Yeah, we have a monitoring system where, they don't even have to be actually on site, and they can watch this. So we've had situations during a hurricane in the south where there was some, critical infrastructure that needed to be running because there was caustics and stuff going through a pipe, and without that heat, it would solidify. So the client was worried, like, hey, we need this to run. Yep. We understand a hurricane's coming. We're prepping that. We're actually evacuating people. But can you run your machines and provide this service with nobody on site? Yeah, so we went through like a risk of mitigation. We talked to them, hey, let's make sure this is set up. Let's, check the boxes, which we did. And we ran this for almost 72 hours with no one there. Still with complete control. If something happened, we could turn off our equipment remotely.
Wow.
And it was an amazing success.
Yeah, that's pretty slick. Okay, so that clarifies a few things that I just wasn't super clear on. So thank you for that. So you're the corporate safety director. I think the things you'd have to be managing here from a risk perspective are pretty obvious, and I'm excited to get into that here in a little bit. But before we do, can you explain a little bit of kind of what brought you to this role? A little birdie told me you have a unique path into a corporate safety.
Yeah, I do have a unique path. It's an interesting path. That's that I think I'd be sitting here. If I would have counted my chips, probably not. Okay. But I had a really good opportunity. Was able to play college baseball at a small school up in Santa Barbara called Westmont. And at that time I was studying to go into exercise science. I really wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon, joints, knees, etc., from anatomy, physiology background. And then had an opportunity to do a little bit of volunteer work. And during that volunteer work, went to the local fire department with our baseball team, kind of saw that niche, saw that teamwork that took place, went, this is interesting. And had a really interesting mentor outside who kind of was already in the fire service and said, hey, check this out. What do you think about this opportunity? And long story short, I ended up doing about 20 years in the fire service here in Southern California. At that time, I was, a fire captain. I was involved in our urban search and rescue team, which is high angle, low angle rescue, confined space, trench, swift water. And then was asked to help start our hazmat program. Got involved in that and as a paramedic. So I was also a paramedic during this time, but got involved in our hazmat program and pretty much started from the ground up with a team of about 8 other individuals. So that's putting training together, putting manuals together, looking at grants. How do we collaborate with other agencies within our complex? And then, did some maritime opportunities and had my Coast Guard license and worked in the LA Long Beach complex. So really unique background on the medical side and being an emergency service provider. I used to say people, what do you do in the fire service? Well, we solve problems. We show up to someone's worst day that they might be having. We provide a service. We mitigate that service really quickly within about 10 minutes, give you a solution, and pretty much leave. And hopefully with a good outcome. So, and then go ahead.
Please go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, and then unfortunately had an injury. Had an injury and that divided and took me in a different direction, a different path. And then it was like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? I'm 40. I got a family of 3, good boy, 2 girls, an amazing wife. And yeah, it wasn't really in my cards to step out of the fire service. And so now conversations started taking, as we all know, it's connections, and an opportunity rose with a regional manager having a conversation through a friend who used to drive the fire engine for me. And hey, have you ever thought about, being in the safety side? Well, fire service is kind of safety related, is it? Well, what are you guys looking for? How would this transition? And there was a lot of parallels, actually a lot. When you look at providing safety, the leadership aspect, and now I've been with Superheat 5 years. So I still look at myself as, as being a greenhorn, being someone new in the industry. I do. I love it, and I have a ton to learn. But I think there's a lot of things that I can bring from past experiences that relate exactly to what I'm doing here with my team.
So to dig into that a little bit, what do you think? And I mean, to whatever degree you're comfortable, do you have any insight as to what the kind of qualities or attributes that the team saw in you when you made this transition that kind of had you be the guy that they hired instead of hiring somebody with a more traditional safety background? Do you think that there was a particular skill set that they were looking for that you felt you brought to the table that helped you kind of get in the door? Not to make you sell yourself too hard, but I'm curious.
No, it's okay. No, honestly. Well, I think part of it has to do too is where I come from, the fire service. You walk into people's homes, and when you walk into those homes, you have to have a bit of confidence, and you have to have a bit of insurgence. And what I mean by that is taking control, right? You have to walk in and take control of the situation and have command presence. And I think that's one thing in our safety role here at the corporate level. You got to look at different situations and know when to engage. You got to know when to, grab someone a little bit by the back and say, hey, go forward, look at this in one area, or maybe sit back and evaluate and look at what your team is and give them coaching and counseling behind the scenes. So coming into the dynamic of Superheat, I think they were looking for someone that would take ownership of the region. And that was one thing. I think I was a niche at that moment in time that they needed. They needed someone that was going to earn the trust of the workforce, because I think other safety reps they had in the past were really comfortable about sitting behind their desk and maybe making phone calls, but never getting out there and getting their boots dirty. And that's one thing you learn really quickly in the fire service. You can't hide. You can't hide. And they aren't afraid to tell you who you are, and you need to earn your keep.
Do you think there were any, or maybe to think back to that time, so you're making this transition, you're kind of reevaluating what your career is looking like, and you got this injury, and then you come in, and so now you're, I guess, in this more, again, I don't know specifically, but let's say more private sector role than you would have been in the fire service, and you've got this very unique skill set. I'm sure a huge amount of that was transferable, but it's got to have been a pretty different environment going into a more private setting. Was there anything that you found you were implementing within maybe the first 3 months where you brought that different perspective in the door and you were able to say, hey, there's some really low-hanging fruit here where I can come in and I can make a change quickly? Or for you, was it more about hanging back and evaluating before you made any of those changes?
I think there's a combination of both. I think there's a period of time where you want to sit back and evaluate and analyze and see the culture, right? You have to learn the culture of the company initially coming in, or what the culture of the workforce is. And again, coming into this industry, it was interesting because right or wrong, there was always a culture of, ooh, we don't want the safety guy here. Especially in the oil and gas industry, maybe other industries may be a little different, but you see all the memes and you see the funny banters and the funny videos and stuff. And even here within Superheat, they had a couple, regional safety managers that maybe didn't earn the respect of the workforce. So coming in and evaluating that and going out on sites and listening to what the employees were saying, watching what they were saying, but also being humble enough that it didn't matter where I came from. I'm still the new person, right? And I need to earn my stripes. So coming out into the field and asking, hey, how do you guys do this? What are your guys' concerns? I want to see it through the eyes of the employees, the eyes of our workers, not so much mine. I have my optic, especially coming in raw, which definitely was an advantage because I didn't have any positive or negative traits coming into this industry. So it definitely brought a different style. And then it was interesting because you just watch employees go, well, thanks for asking me that question. I've never had, a safety manager sit back and talk to me and ask me my opinion. So that ended up, as we all know, that starts building that relationship, and that relationship builds trust. That isn't gained overnight, and you can't demand trust. It's given over a period of time. And, I'll say fortunate, not every experience has been great, because sometimes you have to put your foot down. But even in those scenarios, behind the scenes, the employees know you're taking care of them. And the big change I saw was when I came out to site, they wanted me there because they know I was trying to make it overall successful for, them and the project. We're not here to get them in trouble. We're here to make it successful and go home safe. I mean, again, I've gone home injured. I've been in that seat. I understand.
Yeah, how do you think it would be safe to say that you coming in and almost not being burdened with some of the baggage that, a safety professional who was in a similar role at another company and came and had a certain idea of a way things had to be, you didn't have that kind of holding you back, and you were able to come in and say, how can I have the biggest positive impact on what's happening here, and how do I approach that on kind of a first principles level? That makes a ton of sense. So with that, do you think there were, after you got over that initial hump, so I think you hit the nail on the head there. Respect is earned, not demanded.
Correct.
You got in there, you built a rapport with, the folks you were kind of charged with taking care of. Once you got over that hump, was there anything that you felt you were able to kind of implement based on that previous experience? And I guess what I'm trying to pull out here is, if we were to take you and plug you in at any other company, is there a lesson from the fire service that we could take from somewhere and implement, or is it too specific?
I mean, it's a cliche just talking about leadership. I mean, this is what this is about, right? And what I say is the leadership of ability and taking ownership of, your actions and, leading by example. And that's a big thing. I always said that to, new employees coming in, or what they called rookies. That was the term, or, someone new to my team is like, hey, look, every action, you're representing yourself every day. So be cognizant of that. I'm not saying over-evaluate it. Don't be nervous of it. Be confident in who you are. But also, if you see something, step up and talk to that employee and engage with them and make sure they're doing it the right way. Even if it's a difficult conversation, have it. And don't be afraid. And I think that's one difference, because coming into this industry in the fire service, if you don't speak up, someone can get critically injured, right? Or even someone can die. So even empowering, or we use this new terminology that I learned, stop work authority. I didn't know what that meant. I had no clue. What is stop work authority? What is, empowering your employees to do this and ask those questions? Well, in the fire service, you go on an incident and sometimes it's just 4 of you. So you're eyes and ears for your teammates. Even though that opportunity, I was in charge, as a fire captain, I still rely on that employee who might be sitting in the back seat, who's only been on 6 months, because they may see something, and it's, Joe, you better grab me by the shoulder and go, Larry, do you see that? Do you see that condition changing over there? And trying to make that encouragement, because so many employees, it's really easy for them to sit back, cross their arms, and that's not my responsibility. Yeah. And we're changing that culture here, which has been amazing. Like, it's not looking out for just Superheat employees. When we're on site, we're looking out for everyone. And if you change that culture during a turnaround, with 4,000 people there, imagine how much better that environment and how much safer that environment's going to be as a whole, right? It's just not about Larry. It's not about Joe. It's about us as a team.
Do you think that one of the things that I've spoken to people about, and I believe, is that I think that kind of culture of accountability, of, I don't care if you're the dishwasher, we expect you to step up and say something when there's something to be said, or, if you don't see it, that's cool. But if you see something everybody's responsible for raising that flag. I feel as though people who have experience in those kind of high potential environments, whether it be in a fire service or that was certainly something that I experienced working in the offshore oil and gas industry was when things go wrong, things go really wrong. So there's no,
Right.
That's not my job. You can't get away with that. Everybody needs to be playing, by the same rules. And I think in the offshore space, part of the way that we tried to instill that in the culture was, often you're doing fire drills or emergency drills of some kind every single week. And that really lets people know if things flip over, like we're all in this together, and it highlights that severity as a way to kind of not scare people into it, but remind them of the consequences.
Correct.
In the fire service, obviously, you guys, the danger of the job would have been very obvious. That's you wouldn't have had to tell anybody that fire could hurt them. But was there anything there on this leadership side of things? Do you feel like there was anything specific, whether it be culturally or institutionally, that really fostered leadership in that environment? Was there anything that was, pushing people to look as kind of a leader, or was that just up to the fire captains to instill that culture?
No, I mean, I think in any industry you can look at different individuals, and everybody has a different style. My style of leadership may be different than others, and at the same time, you have project managers, and you may have, what we call technicians, an employee that's a year on. Are they in maybe a managing role? No, but can they still be a leader in the field? 100%. And I'm really a big believer of, I call it coaching and counseling, and it's kind of a HR term, or I used to call it tailboard talks. That's sitting on the back of the fire engine. I still really believe in that, because it's not everybody knows. Everybody's learning. Even myself, I go out there, and yes, I am the corporate safety director, but there's project managers and site managers that know a lot more about this industry than I do. Even some of the safety protocols, within their niche. And I want to be able to understand that and learn from them. And that's one thing from the fire service you really learn is nobody knows everything. And if you think you do, you're going to be humbled very quickly. And it's okay to say, hey, I don't know, but I'm going to go find out for you. And that's, as you're talking and asking, that's one thing about the fire service that's really installed at a very early age is, someone will come and, hey, what do you know about this piece of equipment? Actually, I don't know much. Okay, well, do me a favor. Go research it, go figure that out, and bring it back to us. And they expect a return of goods that's put at a really high level. And no matter how much information, how well you present, they're going to find something to ask you, and challenge you with. But they expect a reply. And they expect a reply very quickly. So coming into the private sector, that was one thing that was kind of a bit of an aha, because, questions would be asked and then you'd reply answers quickly, with some substance behind it. And they were kind of shocked. And that's, a kind of paramilitaristic organization coming from the fire service to the private sector. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes, my tone or my delivery would have to be pulled back a little bit because, again, you're dealing with, same here, but a lot of really type A personalities, and they wanted to eat their own. And so you always had to go above and beyond and push that limit with your response.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of similarities to shipyard life.
Well,
that's all
again, yeah, I've dealt with some maritime involvement and the emergency response in the maritime world, so I understand that culture too.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's paramilitaristic. It's exactly
100%.
what you said. It's when everybody knows exactly how you move up the ranks, like where in the corporate world that's not necessarily the case. You can go in a million directions. In those
Correct.
environments, this is the next step. People who thrive in those environments really like that, clear way to drive forward. And anyway, yeah, I think anyway, quite similar. I won't get into that.
Yeah, that's a tangent for another time, right?
Yeah, that's more of a conversation over a beer.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's, I think those are amazing skills. And I think in many ways, creating what those cultures benefit from, in my opinion, is that clarity that, hey, not only is this where you go next, but, there's so much cultural expectation of what does a good fire captain do? There's going to be different strokes. People are going to have their own interpretations, but I think the fundamental requirements of that role are pretty well established. And that's the same, again, if you're going to be a captain or a chief officer or a chief
Correct.
engineer, same thing. And I feel as though those are industries that benefit from so much historical precedence, where if you come to a new fire company, or I don't know what you'd call them, you're going to have that shared cultural understanding, but we don't have that in the corporate world, where every company's kind of building their own culture and building their own expectations. But I almost feel like that's our challenge as leaders, is how do I make it as clear for you in this environment where we're making our own rules as it was for me, where I was in a place where, the hierarchy was as was established.
Well, you bring up a really good point, and that was a transition, going from that, culture background that I started when I was 21 years old. So I say I was kind of raised in that industry, good or bad, right? And there's some great things that come out of it, and there's a side of it that isn't always a positive from what you deal with and things that you've seen in the past. But now coming into the private sector, you said it, your mission, if I come in and say I was initially into the Superheat as a Western, safety manager, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? What opportunities and where does that take you? Yeah, and that's, I think, another thing you talk about leadership is you have the opportunity to kind of create your own destiny in the right way. And the one thing that I found out is, as you just build off of that rapport and you build off of gaining the respect, from the fire service, you're a jack of all trades. You were a master of none, right? You weren't, because the tones would go off and you would respond somewhere and you don't really know what you're going into. Yeah, you get dispatched, but a lot of the times you show up on scene, you need to intake that intel. You need to look at the problem really quickly. Okay, what is going on? What is the atmosphere? What's dynamic here? What is, the culture of either a medical aid? What are the signs and symptoms? Or, a catastrophic traffic accident? What are my seclusion zones? What are my resources? What protection? What equipment in order to provide a great service to that, victim or situation? Well, coming into this industry, you look at that and you go, let me solve a problem. Now you get mission creep.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting because, I'm now, hey, what do you think about this? And where does this take place in operations? And you build that rapport with the regional managers. And it was easy. It's easy to get mission creep and not stay in your own zone. But at the same time, what's our goal of safety? It's overall success of the company and providing a good work environment and making sure our employees are safe. So it can go in so many directions. That's what I'm learning.
Okay, well, you've given me. I'm gonna check out this segue. Let's see if we can now translate. We've told some of the stories. We've established a little bit of the background. So now let's talk about Superheat. Let's talk about the way you guys are doing things now and how you are trying to create that clarity for your team. So can you just lay out for me? You said you kind of have these 8 or whatever key roles on your team right now. How does that break down? And I guess why is your team structured in the way it is? Let's start there.
Yeah, so we break it down. We have regional safety managers. You look in the U.S., we break it down into 3 categories. We have the West, it's Colorado West, and we have the Gulf, and then I have the Midwest. So we have 3 safety reps within the U.S., and then we have 2 up in Eastern and Western Canada, and then I have an individual over in the U.K. And then we have an admin support for us. We have, you look at the foundation of our company and the amount of, working hours and the logistics and geographical coverage. We're lean. We are, which is fine. I'm not afraid of that. I think my team does a really good job because they're engaged. And what I mean by that is being engaged is talking to the employees. We evaluate and kind of triage coming from my past background. You triage the different projects and we evaluate the risk and where's our best need to be physically located. And, our industry, of course, it ebbs and flows. It has some different busy periods of time. which is kind of changing now because it seems like,
Yep.
the maintenance portion is now 365, where in the past you could also predict, hey, the spring and the fall is going to be our busy. We may kind of slow down in the summer. That's changing. Um, but I like our structure because my employees really take accountability. And the one thing I always push and is ownership of your region. That it's there's a couple of books I've read in the fire service. You talk about leadership all the time. There's a gentleman that I, like to read and I watch and listen to him all the time. Is Jocko Willink, and he's from the military. And I like what he says about extreme ownership. And that's what I push on my team. Hey, it's your region. You own it. You tell me what you need. How can I help you? I'm here to move those barriers to give you more support and figure out how you can be successful. And I think by doing that, it's really allowed them to look at their region and go, okay, I think this is a good thing. And they'll call and bounce an idea off of me and say, yeah, run with it. And again, that comes back to what I was talking about earlier in the fire service is someone would ask you a question and then you have that opportunity to show, hey, here's the research I'm going to put behind it. Here's a business proposal. Here's, the risk mitigation, prevention, mitigation plan. And then we can develop and build, but it's coming from them. It's not coming from me. I don't want to tell them what to do at all.
Well, yeah, I think that I've read, I think, all of Jocko's books as well. And I know that one of the things that he talks about that I refer back to all the time is that basically your whole job as a leader is to make the objective clear, make sure that they have the resources to achieve the objective, and make sure that, and in almost all situations where things aren't working, you have failed to do one of those two things. And in a small, separate situation, you just have the wrong person trying to achieve those goals. And at a certain point, you need to clarify that. But that's something that I'm always talking to my team about is when they come to me frustrated or whatever, is to say, does the person know what you actually want them to do? Yes or no? Almost always. That's where the failure is. Yeah. And secondarily, did you give them the resources to actually achieve it? And if you're totally confident that both of those have been achieved, then maybe it's just the wrong person in the role. And it's amazing how much fits into that whole framework.
And you speak of that framework, that was the other thing with this industry was, the culture was, I don't want to talk to the safety. If I'm talking to safety, there's something wrong, right? And I kind of embrace that. Yeah. Again, you got to remember, I'm showing up to people's worst day of their life for 20 years. So it became kind of normal. And you kind of become a little bit calloused, and look at things a little differently on, it's not that big of a deal because you're triaging. Now with my team, they call me and hey, I got a problem. If you ever seen that video, good. I've opened up with that with our regional management meetings sometimes, and it can be a little harsh, but I want you to call me, right? I don't have a problem. There's nothing that we can't tackle or figure out together at all. So call and let's work through the issue. And yeah, that's been a big change here, I think.
So with this, a lot of what you're talking about here is cultural change. You're talking about how do we get people to make those calls, to feel comfortable, moving things forward and all that other stuff. And what strikes me is that, again, as you've just laid out, your team, especially the people who you're expecting to make those calls, are pretty geographically distributed.
Correct.
So how do you, especially when you come in as kind of a greenhorn, as you put it, how do you now rally that culture and make people feel connected and safe reaching out to you when you don't have that opportunity to kind of build that relationship, in the office around the water cooler? How do you approach that problem?
Yeah, it's hard because you don't have the coffee in the morning sitting around the table and discussing solving the world's problems. We're talking about family, so it is hard. It is definitely a challenge, and initially getting my footprint comfortable here in the West Coast and learning those employees and earning, I will say, maybe not every employee, but trying to earn their respect. And I think that a lot has to do is if someone asks you a question, is giving them attention, right? Again, it's responding back to them. That's not always, sometimes it can take a day, but it's trying to do that quickly. And my team have really installed that in them. And then going out and looking at some of our bigger projects, It is really easy to get caught behind the computer sometimes, but lacing up the boots and getting out there and getting those boots dirty, you can't put a value on that. And even in my role now, I do that. I make it a point to make sure that I get on site and go see our employees. And again, that's what I'll say is that you earn that respect to the point where if they're pulling cables or they're doing some, how hard is it for me to throw my gloves on for a few minutes and go support and do that? I really believe, and you see this in all industries, but no, that's not my role. And they put their hands in their pockets. Well, where I come from, you don't dare put your hands in your pockets at all. So by going out and putting your gloves on and pulling that cable, you earn that trust, you earn that respect with those employees. Now, do I get to touch every employee in this company? No. But when you do pull up the sites, and go out and chat, there's going to be those employees out there that are the leaders internally. And when you walk out there and, they walk up to you and give you a hug and you start talking about family, the optics of that with other employees, they're saying hi and they're happy to have the safety guy here. I've watched that kind of aha moment take place. But again, you can't force that. So it's by going out there and engaging and talking and supporting, right? And don't get me wrong, there's those situations where, discipline has to be implemented. But I think there's a lot of times where coaching, and having those tailboard talks are really important. And I think, praise in public, discipline in private. That's something that's really, I use a lot. Pull someone aside, give them the respect if they need to be talked to.
So, okay, I think this is all that cultural change, and I think again, I couldn't agree with you more. That again, pulling on a pair of gloves and sitting there and showing that you're not coming down from the ivory tower, that you're just a human with a job like anyone else. I think that can be super, super powerful. And again, to just have that kind of relationship with the boots on the ground who are ultimately like that's your company. You guys in management, all due respect, you're just there to make all that work a little smoother. So with that, one of the things that I believe in, and you may disagree and we can talk about that, but I think that we do need to find ways to be tracking and just, keeping a scorecard so that we can know that we're doing things well and we're pushing things forward. So can you help me understand, again, and I think this is particularly interesting where you have a fairly geographically distributed team, how are you, you have a geographically distributed team and you give them a lot of distributed leadership. They're out there being autonomous, running the initiatives they want to run. How do you make sure that you can keep accountability in that environment? What are you using to track those regional managers and make sure that things are working well? Is that based on feedback from their teams, or do you have particular KPIs you're looking at, or you're just looking at LTI rates?
Yeah, no,
Can
great
you just
question.
give us a little bit of a look at how you?
I think at my level, we definitely, each region has a weekly ops meeting. Those ops meetings don't have to be very long, but they're, hey, let's talk about what we got going on. What's the priority here? What logistics do we need to operate? So I sit in those weekly ops meetings. And sometimes it's sitting and just having a cup of coffee and listening and seeing what challenges they might have. And then with my team, we meet weekly. We're a pretty close-knit group. So behind the scenes, they're always chatting and we're allowed to work together. I don't think there's any egos on our team. That's one amazing thing with our team is, we're all, even though I'm the corporate safety director, at the final end of the day, I might have to make that decision, but we all have a say. I want to know what Joe's opinion is. And I want you to question me. So when we're looking at operations throughout the companies, we have different, we have audits internally. We have different safety programs in the sense of we do monthly safety audits with our project managers. And that's one thing we really changed. We brought values. What do you guys think is needed? You guys give me the feedback. I don't want you just to go do paperwork. I don't want you just to go pencil whip anything either. Like, again, every medical run that I went on in my career, you had to get a pen and fill out documentation, right? The paperwork was, and that documentation could come back 4 years later and be pulled up in court. So whatever you wrote down, right, can get litigated and get pulled up on a screen and torn apart. And I say that in a good way. But so with our site managers and area managers, what can we make it and how can we value that safety aspect and go out and show you and train you to add to our team? So I look at our area managers and our safety managers, they're part of my safety team. They're out there also representing us. So that's another coverage that we have. And they're really good about, hey, I have this issue. Let me come talk to you. And so now that just gives us another tangent in the field. And again, we're auditing. I mean, you're looking at different matrices. I'm not always, I think there's pros and cons to some of the audit stuff. I think you need to look at what the gaps are and then analyze that gap and look, do we really have a trend here? If there is a trend, okay, let's fix it. But let's look at why we need to fix it. And let's also collaborate how to fix it. Not just from Larry's opinion or my safety member's opinion. How can we do it as a whole? Because I think there's a lot of things in safety people don't realize unless you explain it to them. You explain to them the behind the scenes. This is where we're at now. This is where we need to get. How do we do that together?
Yeah, I think that, that's a great point to look at those audits as a data point and not an evaluation. That's going to tell us something that we can use to learn and improve. But if we look at that as our finish line, then we're kind of upside down here. And that's, I think, what can lead to a lot of those environments where maybe people aren't so keen to talk to the safety person, because all the safety person cares about is getting a 99 on their audit. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a different thing coming into this industry is, your scoring criteria of what safety is judged on. That was, going along in the fire service here, not every fire goes well. You can go back to the root cause and, it's always communication. The goal is not to get anybody hurt, either the citizens or yourself. And that's the same with my team. You don't want anybody to get hurt. So how do we figure that out? And it's not always a clear path because every job's different.
So, speaking of things going well and not going well, it's my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, that the safety team at Superheat has actually won a couple awards for safety performance. Any accuracy in that?
We've had some success here. It's kind of funny, you're smiling when I say that. We had a great opportunity here, and you might see some passion behind me talking about this, but we had an opportunity, in the state of Indiana to go submit some awards and submit through a safety. And again, that's kind of a new process. So we found an opportunity, put the team together, said, hey, let's go submit different platforms. So there was one for safety innovation. There was one for safety leadership excellence. Again, we had the opportunity, knock on wood, we're recordable free. We have been for the last 3 years. And that's another whole conversation that's amazing with our team and oversight. But I had a newer safety manager out in the Midwest who came up through the ranks, which is I love that kind of story because they understand the operations from walking in this company raw to now being my safety manager. And now I get to mentor that individual, but they've never did I say formal presentation in front of a judge of panels. So we put together a presentation. He went out there and executed. So it was really fun. I say I had a lot of fun with it because we got to mentor them and coach them and then going out there and having success. They were literally sitting at the awards banquet and we were kind of the low company on the pole in the sense of, work hours. There were some big players in the room and we won. Our safety innovation is what it was about our technology and our equipment. So that was a huge success. And it was fun because I was getting text messages from my regional manager saying we won and he couldn't believe it. But you go back and you look at it, it doesn't surprise me because all our equipment that we do has some safety process involved in it. So we have this amazing technology that we call our smart packs. And when we run our cable, there's no power going to it. So in order to turn that power on, it's not a true lotto system, but we have what we call a smart card that you swipe. And when you swipe that, it tells you the time, the location, and the employee that's turning on that energy to those heaters. So now those are trained to make sure that area is, combustible free, the area is safe, it's barricaded off, you're taking ownership. So Joe, if you swipe your card, it timestamps it and it allows to turn that source on. If you have an issue, you can swipe it and it turns it off. So that's part of one tangent of our technology that we have. So we were presenting it to this company and the judges, and they just kept asking questions. So my safety manager, when he left, how'd it go? He's like, they kept asking questions and wanted to know more and more. And he was really nervous. And I'm like, that's a good thing. If people are engaged and they want to know more about our equipment and our company, how amazing. So yeah, it was a big success.
Yeah.
It's always great to see people from the outside understand what you're doing as a company and how we put into our equipment and our employees, because it's really easy not to look at safety when you're developing equipment.
Is there anything just in regard to that equipment? Is there anywhere where people can go if they're interested to learn more about that? Because it sounds pretty cool. It's amazing. Just there are so many problems in safety that can be solved by a timestamp. That's a very powerful tool. But is there anywhere people can go to learn more about what you guys are doing there if they want to learn from it, or if there's anything they can maybe respectfully steal so that they can make their team safer? Is there anywhere they could go to learn more about this?
I mean, yeah, you can always go to our website, and look around, our business website at Superheat. It's, www.superheat.com.
Yeah.
And, there's some information that's on there.
Okay.
And understand our technology 100%.
Gotcha. Yeah. I'm just curious because, again, that card system just sounds like something that is very cool that you guys are using, but sounds like something that other people could apply to different scenarios.
Yeah. And again, even on the operations side, you look at accountability and, say auditing. We have, an internal program that we use, and it's called SmartView. So it's an app that's been developed, and our CEO, his mind and what he thinks futuristic is unbelievable. And this app, like I said, is right now I could turn on and look at any active project that we have, and we can look at, our manpower on site. We can look at what's going on and what stages that equipment is. Is it heating up? Is it soaking? Is it ramping down? We can look at different charts to see if there's issues. And then we have, like what we call turnover logs. So the sites are doing, and they're inputting turnover logs and kind of almost like doing a logbook of, hey, here's shift exchange, a few notes. So now you can come back and kind of get the atmosphere of what's going on, and you can timestamp and go, okay, they're struggling on this. They may need support, or no, things are going really well. We might be waiting on another service company scaffolding to be built. So we're on a delay. And then looking at those aspects, and then along with all our safety paperwork, our JHAs and tailgates, they go under this special project. So they can go back and look at that project and go, okay, our paperwork is accurate. We're turning it on time. It's a soft audit, but it's all under one umbrella, and we all have access to it. I'm not physically there like we talked about earlier, but I have, presence in that technology to see exactly what's going on as I'm sitting here in Southern California. That's going on down in, Lake Charles.
Yeah, when that information, I think that visibility of just knowing what's going on. Again, one of the things I always bring up is, the ISO definition of risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives, and I see that our role as safety professionals is to reduce that uncertainty, to see where somebody could be making a decision that maybe doesn't make sense when you have a little bit more information, or maybe they're perceiving risk incorrectly, and it's our role to sit, to just step in and help elevate them a little bit. And it's amazing how many safety teams try to do that without knowing what the uncertainty is, while being totally detached from the actual day-to-day. So I think the more that you can see what's going on in real time, it just helps you to do your job easier, even if it's ultimately an operational tool.
Correct.
Yeah.
But even though it's operations, there's still a tangent, right, of the safety aspect.
Yeah. Well,
and that's where I think safety, it crosses so many borders. And again, that's the private industry is safety involves in operations. Safety looks at planning. Safety deals with HR. Yep. You can get pulled in a lot of different directions really quickly.
100%. So this ties me into something else that I've got in my notes here. And I think there's maybe a bit of a connection, or maybe this is just a weak segue. We'll find out in just a second. Bottom line up front. What does that mean to you?
Bottom line up front. Well, that's just giving a quick scenario or a quick explanation of, what the next intent's going to be. And what I mean, I guess where I use it is here's my message. let me tell you quick, clear and concise, or what I used to call a situational status. It was called the sit-sat report. Here's what's going on. Here's the bottom line. And if you need to learn more, I can explain. But here's where I'm going. Here's the reasons why. And almost, it's blunt, right? I'm kind of struggling to explain it. I know what it means to me.
Sure.
It's just being clear and concise on your objectives. And then if you need to understand the backstory, we can go into that. But I don't have a lot of time for that.
Yeah.
So, it's a military term, high up operations. It was used in the fire service when, you look at the wildland scenarios. Every morning they'd have meetings, or incident management team that was part of. There's a lot of players, so people are very, very busy. They don't have a lot of time to jump in the weeds and want to know the whole history or how did we get here. Tell me what I need to know. Tell me what the objectives are. Give me direction and let me go.
Yep. And why do you think that's an important tool beyond just clarity and busyness? Do you think that there's, do you think that forces you to identify what's going on in a different way than you would if you were just, not forced to summarize something in a single sentence?
Yeah, I don't want to get, sometimes I don't want to get in the weeds.
Yeah.
I say it, I don't want to know, the history or what's behind. What are the objectives? And to make it clear and concise, and how can we go from point A to point B in a straight line, right? I don't want to zigzag there. So tell me what's needed. And I think really some people they're afraid with that bluntness or maybe assertiveness on those conversations. And I don't want someone to come in and start telling me a story to soften me up. Just tell me, right? Tell me what you need and let's go.
Yeah, it's like a professional version of TLDR, which they use on the internet. With, like too long, didn't read. This is the one sentence summary.
Correct. And so operating with my CEO and the president that I report to, we have a great collaboration with that. It's emails don't have to be formal, and it's really nice, right? It can be bullet pointed, and he operates that way. He's extremely busy, which is great, and so it's quick bullet points, and so it takes away that formal writing and really having to worry about that. And sometimes that takes time. So give me a couple bullet points. What's the problem? What's your solution? And we'll agree, or hey, look at this, and then come back. And things get executed quickly.
And it focuses on action instead of focusing on context. So if somebody wants to take that, and maybe if you can, do you have any examples of how you use this within just the safety org? So I totally understand talking to the CEO. He's got a lot on his mind. Conciseness is probably his number one thing he's looking for. But while you're trying to establish that within your team, how do you get people comfortable with that level of kind of, hey, I'm going to challenge you to just tell me what you're trying to tell me as quickly and directly as possible? How do you do that in a way that makes people not scared they're going to piss you off?
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to, the way you deal with your team. And, I've always said, I said this from taking this new role, again, kind of interesting dynamic within my company, right? The players that I have on my team all watched me come into this company from day one. So I've kind of set that example. So then when I had the opportunity to take the reins and move into the lead position, I always, and I say it in our meetings, I want you to challenge me. If you guys aren't asking me questions and you're not being blunt, we have a problem, right? Just because I'm making a decision, it doesn't mean it's always right. So Joe, challenge me. You bring a different skill set and a different optic to the conversation. So ask. Now, we do have, an understanding that once the decision's been made, let's move on. But we're going to collaborate together and we're going to figure it out together. And again, that has to do with my leadership style is responding to them. How do I respond to them when they write something? And yeah, I'm pretty streamlined, and again, that comes back to the culture, because where I come from, you had to make decisions within, time was of the essence. If you didn't make a decision and look at something as a paramedic, that can be cliche, life or death. And you see that, being even a preceptor when we were training paramedic students, you'd walk in and look at someone and they're still learning that technique. And you're like, all right, hurry up. It's, this is a load and go situation because of these situations. Now you can come back and train and teach, and hopefully they realize that. And my team's done that now. They call me, and if there is a situation, an injury or an incident, again, give me the bluff. I don't need the whole history. And there's a great opportunity. Tell me what's wrong. What do you need my support? And where are we going with this? Give me the situational status.
And you've said here that you talk about this. You're bringing up these. To me, what just sounds like your leadership values. Again, like, you need to challenge me. That's something that you're trying to kind of instill on a values level. And you said that you mentioned this in your meetings. Are you bringing up things like this in every meeting, or is this something that you're gardening all the time? And I don't mean to kind of pick it apart too much, but I think this is a question that I often think about is, man, do I want to be sitting on my soapbox every single day?
No.
Are people going to tune out? Or, finding that balance can sometimes be really tough, because I know these are things that I often think about a lot. And then I'll realize that, oh, you know what? I've never really sat the team down and talked about this in 6 months. And maybe that's too long. So how do you make sure that, again, you're kind of nurturing these values in your team as often as you need to?
Yeah, I think you need to allow it to be natural. Am I doing that every meeting? No. And I'll say I'm also someone that likes to have fun.
Okay.
And I really embrace that. I think there's, it can't be business all day long. And maybe I look at my team, and I take value in saying this, my teams are also my family inside. And again, you got to understand where I come from, because in the fire service, a third of my life, or a third of my time was with those group of individuals, and you become very tight with them. Again, not everybody you work with you like, but you have a mutual respect because they got each other's back. Now, coming into this industry, I will say it, maybe I would like, hopefully they say the same thing. My team, I like being close with them. They're my coworkers, they're my subordinates, however structure you want to talk, but they're my friends. Yeah. And so again, it's not every meeting are you talking about per se leadership, but we've chatted about this outside this. It's bringing stuff like your podcast, how it's presented to us as a team, and using your podcast in giving them little things. Hey, FY, check this out. Hey, have you seen this little thing from Jocko? Have you seen this thing from Simon Semenek? Have you seen these little opportunities? Now my team, what they're doing, they're seeing that, and they're bringing it together and sharing it as a group. And what that does is stimulates growth. And then now we can collaborate and talk about it. So, we've had those opportunities, and do we do it every meeting? No, it depends what our workloads is. It depends what our objectives are during our meetings. And sometimes we may have a down period. So, hey, everybody needs to grow. And you need to, I'm a big proponent of education. You need to continue on your education. Now, that can go down another rabbit hole. I'm not saying like certifications are always the best thing. I think you need to take those certifications and know how to apply them. Because I used to see that from the fire service. You'd have someone that would have all these certs, but you'd watch them on an incident, and you're like, okay, you got all this amazing education. It says you know how to do all this stuff. But really, when things get to, push the grind, you spin out of control and you can't manage or delegate. And so it's that collaboration with all of us together. And I'll have other reps, run the meetings. And hey, what's your input today? Ian, you run this meeting. You take over and take charge, and you bring your philosophy into it. So yeah, it's not a soapbox. You can't do that because they'll turn off. I've been on that receiving end before. Right? You don't want to be told what to do.
Yeah, well, that's cool. I mean, again, right down to what you just said there, like the power of just, I had somebody tell me that, again, you need to be planning. You're not doing your job well unless you're planning your succession. And right down to, as you said, having somebody else run the meeting, even if you're the team lead, to just let them try it on and see how it goes, and give you that space to take a step back and again, not be shoving anything down anyone's throat. Because I think, again, anyone in a command position, sometimes, especially if you're under a lot of stress, you can default into these kind of more authoritative positions, and ultimately you're just undermining your ability to be an effective leader. You're just being a manager at that point.
Correct. Yeah, and sometimes, my mind doesn't stop. Um,
I got,
you know,
I
it
feel you on that
doesn't.
one. Yeah.
It's a good and a bad, but it's like, you know, I care. So it's like,
Yeah.
I want my employees, I want our team to be successful. And again, you know, there's a bit of passion behind that, and I'm pretty optimistic, you know, encouraging individuals. So it's like, let's go. It's don't be afraid. You know what? There's no challenge that isn't big enough. Let's go figure it out. And is it if you need this education, let's figure out how to get you there. Because my safety team, you know, well, I'll say our whole safety team's kind of come up through the ranks, which is amazing. I'm kind of the outsider initially.
So, well, that's I feel like leaders are almost always outsiders in one way or another.
Correct.
With that, though, this kind of brings me to another question that I feel we haven't touched on, and I'm curious to understand is, you know, you have this super kind of optimistic, supportive leadership style where you're really trying to elevate your team and make them feel comfortable and push them forward. And as you said, education and having a growth mindset, super important. How does that work as it relates to your leadership team? You know, the CEO, the folks like that. How do you get the resources to be able to support your team in that way? Is that something that's challenging? Again, we don't need to kind of hit it too hard, but
No,
do you have that kind of management support?
I do. Yeah, I'm really blessed. I mean, I say it. It's, you know, I'm very lucky to have that touch point in the sense that I can call the CEO at any time and have that conversation. And again, that's been built over time. Even with our president, his very vast education background, it's really fun because he even had kind of a medical background. So when we get to those conversations, I mean, to the point sometimes we were talking about a situation with an employee that was non-work related who was having some cardiac problems, and he started going down the path about the anatomy and cardiac enzymes and all this, and it kind of caught me off guard. And so we now got to elevate our conversation, right? Because you never know who you're talking to, and when you have those conversations, you need to be able to relate at different levels. And again, that's one thing I'm going to say coming into this organization that I brought, because I would realize how to talk to the employees in the field and then be able to walk in and talk to the CEO. And what I related that to was going on a medical run, talking to a patient and trying to figure out what was a chief complaint or the root cause of the problem, how to fix it, but talking to an individual at their level, trying to explain medically what's taking place so they're comfortable, and then providing treatment. And then you take that and you transition that walking into the hospital and dealing with, you know, an ER doctor or a trauma doctor and a team who are all medical professionals and talk, you know, physiology, anatomy at this level, and then translating that and be able to produce, again, a bluff, you know, bottom line up front synopsis of here's the situation, here's where we're at, here's the transition. That's really opened my eyes in this industry, because to me it's normal, but not to a lot of people. So you look at, you know, they go out and talk about safety, or, you know, I learned all these OSHA codes really quickly because OSHA really didn't exist in the fire service. I mean, it did reporting, but you didn't understand, you know, all these CFRs and these titles. And coming into this industry, you looked at it and I was like, wow, you know, some people could talk code over code, but what's that code mean? You know, yeah, you look at your safety policies, you know, what does our safety policies mean? They look good. They're really written. The verbiage is amazing to sit in front of like an attorney or someone like that. But do our employees understand it? You know, do they really want to read all that, I say, minutia or legal jargon? No, they don't. They want to know, again, the bluff. They want to know the meats and potatoes. Just give them the basics. You know,
well, it goes back to that leadership tenet. Is your first objective is be clear in what you're trying to achieve. And I think that's something that so many people get wrong in safety, is that they have a document that if you are a safety professional, you can understand. But if they got candid feedback from the people who are actually supposed to kind of process and implement this document, you know, is this a hazardous condition or a hazardous behavior? We've done, in my professional life, we've done surveys, and people in the field are like, I don't really know what the difference is. I just tick a box.
Correct.
And meanwhile, you know, everyone else treats this like it's gospel. And just on a design level, these things are built for the wrong audience.
Or in the safety world, what I'm learning is like everybody tries to create their own, you know, footprint. They try to have their finger in something and recreate something. And by recreating something doesn't always mean it's a it's going in the right direction. And that's another thing, the oil and gas industry, and I say this, it's like the lotto system. Just had a great conversation with an employee or an individual at one of the big corporate refineries who was doing a presentation about lotto. And again, you look, okay, what's the intent of lotto? Lockout isolation, right? It's to protect so there's no energy that could actually potentially hurt someone. But now we go to these different plants and every program is different with the same objective. It's like sometimes it's mind blowing for me.
Well, that's something that we could have a whole separate conversation on, because I think that, not only I think it's amazing that everybody's trying to pursue excellence and everybody has their own ideas on how the things can be iterated and can be improved. But I think when you really try to look at how do we measure different safety programs and actually understand who's being effective, because there's a technical element and a cultural element, you can never understand which one is affecting your results because everybody's culture is different and everybody's technology is different. And you have too many confounding variables to understand who's doing anything right. It's, there is definitely a degree of intellectual dishonesty there, in my opinion. But I think that's a very interesting problem that I think the industry is coming to terms with, or I'd like to think it is.
No, I think it's going in a great direction.
It is crazy. Yeah, it's an interesting problem. Okay, so I'm just looking here. We're getting near the end of our time. So I just want to kind of circle back here and say again, I think one of my biggest takeaways from this call has been, again, I think a lot of these things that we've talked about as far as leadership. So often, the podcast, we talk a lot about safety minutia. And I think what we've talked about a lot here today is, again, just how do you come in and again, earn respect with the people below you and earn authority with the people above you. And I think that's really, really powerful. And I guess on that note, is there anything else you want to get out there or anything else that I don't know, messages you want to share either with the audience or with your team if they want to listen and hear what Larry's got to say?
No, yeah. I mean, I think we've covered so much, and it's just the intent of, when someone comes to you with a problem is figure out what the solution is and get back to them, right? Try to solve that problem quickly. Don't let it run on in time. I think as time goes, you lose that capture, you lose that, collective audience of, hey, we can work through this together. And again, in business that happens, it's really easy to get pulled in so many different directions. So try to task yourself on if, one of your teammates needs support, tell them, be upfront with them. Hey, give me a couple days, right? I need a couple days to get to you, but I will get to you and make sure you do that. And once you set that tone, then they know they can rely on you, and it goes both ways, right? So we can't do everything today. I mean, again, I got 3 kids, a 12, a 9, and a 7-year-old, and a wife that I'm trying to keep up to. So you're managing that, and so is everybody else, right? I mean, everybody else has other tangents outside of just work. So you got to be cognizant of that and support that. And it's just, don't be afraid to have those conversations or go ask for input. And that's another thing, really I would suggest is if you don't know where you're at, go ask. Don't be afraid of walking down the hallway to, either your supervisor or maybe a VP in your company that's in operations and go, hey, Joe, can you give me some feedback? We're trying to do this. We're an asset for your company. Tell me what you think we're doing good or bad. And then take that information and go evaluate that yourself and look at how you can make that better. But build those relationships.
Well, I think a call for courage is a great place to round things out. I guess on that note, again, Larry, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I know I've learned a lot. I hope everybody else has as well. And thanks so much for joining us. I had a great time, and for everybody listening, Larry joined us at around 6:00 in the morning. So shows his dedication to getting this message out there. I think it's pretty awesome.
No, I appreciate what you guys are doing, Joe. It's a great platform. I'm a fan, as you know. I listen to this, and I think there's some amazing, individuals that you've had on here, and we can all learn from each other, and I love having these conversations at a high level with, anybody coming, even the new person coming in has value, but at the corporate level is learning from others because we all bring something to the table. And I say it's amazing platform, amazing stuff that you're doing here. And I'll continue to be a fan and listen in. And Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Larry. I'm sure everybody's going to learn a lot from this one. So with that, we'll shut her down and hope to catch you on another one soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Joe.
All right. Well, thank you for making it all the way through the episode. I just wanted to mention again, this podcast is brought to you by Opslock. Opslock is the new way to keep your team safe at work. We're basically the most modern and advanced health and safety tool out there. If that sounds interesting to you, one of the things that we're offering to listeners of this podcast is free access to our workplace observations tool, meaning that you can roll out a digital workplace observations tool in your company, no matter what the size is, for free. If that sounds interesting or you just want to learn a little bit more, go to our website, opslock.com, fill out the Get a Demo form, let us know that you heard about us on the podcast, and someone, probably me, will set up a call with you. So anyway, that's it. Thanks a lot for listening through the episode, and I hope you have a great day.